The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello and welcome to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast triple feature. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight on the marquee are three movies, count them, three, that are biographical films that explore the personal and professional struggles of iconic entertainers, highlighting their rise to fame, emotional challenges, and legacy. And those movies are, in the order that we'll be talking about them, Stan and Ollie, a 2018 biographical comedy drama film directed by Jon S. Baird. It was inspired by Laurel and Hardy, the British tours by A.J. Marriott, which chronicled the later years of the comedy double act Laurel and Hardy. The film stars Steve Coogan, Jon C. Reilly as Stan Laurel, and Oliver Hardy. It focuses on the details of the comedy duo's personal relationship while relating how they embarked on a grueling music tour that pretty much killed Ollie of the United Kingdom and Ireland during the 1953 and struggled to get their film made. Then we've got Chaplin, a 1992 biographical comedy drama about the life of English comic actor and filmmaker Charlie Chaplin, the most famous person in the world and the most important person to ever come out of Hollywood. It was produced and directed by Richard Attenborough. It stars Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., Aunt May, Marissa Tomei, Ghostbuster Dan Aykroyd, as well as Penelope Ann Miller and Kevin Kline. And then finally, we have Judy, the 2019 biographical drama film based on the life of American entertainer Judy Garland, which was directed by Rupert Gould. And it is an adaptation of the Olivier and Tony-nominated West End and Broadway play End of the Rainbow by Peter Quilter. The film stars Renee Zellweger, Jessie Buckley, Finn Wittrock, Rufus Sewell, and Michael Gabon. And joining me tonight is, of course, on mute. There we go. He's Sean Comer. You're not. How do you do, Sean?
Hey, everybody. You chose three really interesting movies this week, and I won't say I'm surprised by how much I enjoyed them because I always love a good biopic, but I was surprised at how I wasn't really watching these and necessarily thinking all that much about the respective life and times, rise and fall and rise again, and sometimes fall again, of, Judy Garland, Laurel and Hardy, and Charlie Chaplin. But it's rare that I watch a biopic and what really sticks with me is kind of the big picture of it. And I would say each of these had some real big pictures about not just fame necessarily, but about art and about the evolution of artists. And
I threw each one of these into ChatGPT and I said, "Hey, summarize the similarities between them," and it gave me like 3 pages worth of stuff. And it really did talk about how the fame monster, the entertainment monster, must be fed, and how it feeds on people and what it does to them. Each one of these biopics in their own way really speaks to how some of the best entertainers of the 20th century often struggled with what would to many be a dream come true. And I'm sure For them, they love their careers, but at what cost?
Well, and I mean, and their struggles that while they've evolved and some of those struggles have made great strides forward that I think the subjects each of tonight's movies would have appreciated, they're really not gone. And I was mentioning in chat how I feel like those struggles in many ways transcend each and every medium that we talk about here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network.
So I saw all three of these movies when they were in theaters. But funny story about Stan and Ollie and Judy. It sounds like it's its own movie. Stan and Ollie and Judy, and mashed potatoes and turkey and stuffing. But I saw Stan and Ollie as an independent movie, and I saw that in the theater like one Sunday afternoon. And I think I used like my AMC or my Movie Pass or something. And I, for whatever reason, whether it was like sleep apnea or cancer or whatever my issue was, I kept dozing off during it. Not that I wasn't enjoying the movie. I mean, it's a talky movie, and we'll start talking about it in just a minute. But like the most, like the zenith, the denouement, the most, the biggest conflict in the movie is a polite conversation between these two that ends with, "I loved us." No, you may have loved us, but you never loved me. It's the Thanos snap of Stan and Ollie. So I kept dozing off during it, and it was like, I really want to watch this. I really want to see what this movie was about, so I need to watch it again. And the same thing happened to me with Judy. I made a point of going to see this little indie picture that got Renee Zellweger an Oscar, I believe it was. And I was really interested in it. I was interested in the life of Judy Garland. And I kept passing out. And every time I woke up, she's like falling. Every time I woke up to see Renee Zellweger as Judy Garland falling all over herself, like fucking up on stage. It was like screaming at somebody. And I'm like, is this the whole movie? I'm missing stuff here. So I needed to go back, and I needed a reason to go back and rewatch these. And so when we were coming up with ideas for podcasts, I was like, Stan and Ollie and Judy, I think would make a really great pairing. We just need a third one. And I saw Chaplin in 1992. I was in 10th grade at the time. I actually saw that in the theater. And I remember this was like Robert Downey Jr., I think at the height of his original pre-Iron Man powers, as I recall. And I remember it being really well received. It got a whole bunch of awards, as I remember. But I hadn't seen it since. And I'm like, okay, well, that gives me a chance. That gives me an opportunity to revisit this as an adult, because in 10th grade, like I'm just kind of beginning my journey as a film snob, but I hadn't really thought about it since. So that's
now. Remind me, was Chaplin pre or post arrest for Downey?
Without looking it up, I couldn't tell you.
Because I want to say, if that was post arrest, I want to say I think this was kind of his comeback movie.
Maybe. Robert Downey Jr. was arrested. Let's see. Personal life. Well, he's been he's been drug free since 2003. If that helps. Without killing the podcast dead and trying to read through this, I don't remember when this was. But in terms of his filmography, let's see where this lies. Let's see. He was in Less Than Zero in 1987. Then he did this. He made his big acting comeback. Okay, he stayed in court-ordered drug treatment program and has maintained his sobriety since 2003. He made his comeback in the 2003 The Singing Detective. So that was after this.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
And you hadn't seen any of these before?
No, I knew there was a biopic about Stan and Ollie, but I had never gotten around to it. I had completely forgotten there even was a Judy Garland biopic, let alone that it starred freaking Renee Zellweger. And Chaplin is one that I was always aware of, but that I never got around to. And that kind of surprises me because Alexis, of course, being the huge classic film buff that she is, credit where it's due. She's downright encyclopedic. I can't believe that isn't one that she suggested that we watch while we were together that we never got around to. So wow, that was a treat.
Let's get into Stan and Ollie. And Stan and Ollie, the Laurel and Hardy comedy duo, will always have a special place in my heart. One, because I'll always have somewhat of an attraction to like the vaudeville style of comedy. There's something about it that was always appealing to me, even as a kid. What little of it I got to see here and there on television. But more importantly, there's a lot of catchphrases that I use. I say them a lot on here, and maybe people don't know this, but they're not mine. I stole them from my dad. And my dad, of course, stole them from whatever the hell he grew up with. So a lot of stealing of people's bits.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly does, Ollie. I say that at work, and I work with 20 and 30-year-old black women who never know what the hell I'm talking about. I might as well be from Mars. And so they'll say something. I'm like, well, it certainly does, Ollie. And they're just
the ones who think they get it think you're just doing the Family Guy bit, which you are. But yeah, I guess when you say the name Ollie, I guess you can kind of tell, kind of generationally, kind of place someone in the strata according to what they think of first and what they think you're referencing.
Yeah, so I had to explain Laurel and Hardy to an office full of black women who could not have been less interested. But damn it, I was committed to the bit, and I was going to tell them who they were. So Laurel and Hardy were a British-American comedy team during the classical Hollywood era of American cinema, consisting of Englishman Stan Laurel, who passed away in 1965, and American Oliver Hardy, the big fat guy. He died in 1957, which will be referenced in this movie. Starting their careers as a duo in the silent film era, they later successfully transitioned to the talkies. In the late 20s, God, Robert and I referenced the talkies with modern movies. It's really funny to us. From the late 1920s to the mid-1950s, they were internationally famous for their slapstick comedy, with Laurel playing the clumsy childlike friend to Hardy's pompous bully. Their signature theme song, known as the Cuckoo Song, Cuckoo or Dance of the Cuckoo,
March of the Cuckoos, yeah,
was heard over their film's opening credits and became as emblematic of them as their bowler hats. I'm old enough that there were reruns of Laurel and Hardy on cable television when I grew up, and I did not watch a lot of them. I did not watch a lot, but I saw enough of it. And my dad had some books lying around the house, so I've always been aware of who they were and what they were, without necessarily being like the world's biggest consumer of their product.
It wasn't cable for me, but back when I was growing up back in Spring Lake Park, Minnesota, the local stations often had, particularly late at night or during the day on Sundays and Saturdays, would have syndicated block of like Little Rascals, Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy. Matinee at the Bijou, I think, was what the block was called.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad would often, like you did back in the VHS era, would make his little like homemade mixtapes of Stooges, Rascals, and Laurel and Hardy. So I too have some extremely fond memories. But I think even back then, I was fascinated because, when that classic slapstick kind of gets parodied, it gets dumbed down just to get to just a
today. Like there's still
but hear me out. It kind of gets reduced in parody down to just a stream of pratfalls, rapid fire, old timey references, and sometimes just a wee bit of jingoism in there. But the fact is, when you really watch it, like you could watch, especially the Stooges and Laurel and Hardy, there is a ton of genuine performing artistry to really doing it well. And there's not just being able to take the pratfall, but there's the timing, there's the chemistry, there's the reactions, and that's something about Stan and Ollie that I really have to commend Jon C. Reilly and Steve Coogan for capturing truly beautifully in their performances.
I want to take a time out from talking strictly about Stan and Ollie and just to say this one thing about all three of these, and I'll get back to it.
Yeah, sure.
Other than the obvious subject matter, the one through thread with all three of these movies is how transformative some of these performances are. You know, Steve Coogan and Jon C. Reilly, especially Jon C. Reilly in the big fat suit and makeup and everything. Like, I didn't see Jon C. Reilly anymore. I saw I saw Ollie, I saw Oliver Hardy. With Robert Downey Jr.
You say that. I feel like Steve Coogan was the one who really disappeared into his role.
Yeah, especially some of the stage performances. Like, I can't get him sprinkling the salt on the egg out of my head. And like, oh my God, that's right off the television show. For a lot of people, Robert Downey Jr. will always be Iron Man. That, he is now married to that role until he dies. But I still remember Robert Downey Jr. as the pickup artist. I was actually talking about Molly Ringwald today. I got up and I said, as I was starting to leave my office, I said, all right, put your mittens on your kittens and away we go. And of course, the one woman who is, I think, in her like late 20s, early 30s, who never knows what I'm talking about, was like, what now? What are you doing to kittens? And the other girl right next to her, who's a little bit older and seems a little bit more with it, goes, Grease. I'm like, you get the star. But which then, if you've been on a podcast with me, you start with one thing, you just sort of, rush an egg into other stuff. So we went from that. We started talking about Olivia Newton-John, and eventually, I had just a couple of other actors and actresses named, but Molly Ringwald. That's where I was going with this. We somehow landed on, because she brought up 16 Candles. So I started talking about, like, I became like the autistic guy in the office. I'm like, let me tell you about all the Brat Pack stuff. So that's what got me to Robert Downey Jr. I was like trying to figure out, like, why am I telling him this? That's what it was. She mentioned 16 Candles and Molly Ringwald, and I said, had you ever seen The Pickup Artist? Which, by the way, when we eventually do a Robert Downey Jr. focus, one of those has to be The Pickup Artist, because his line about if I told you had the body of a tomato or some shit like that, would you hold it against me? I swear to God, it's like one of my, like, as a kid, I even appreciated how funny that line was as a pickup line. Anyway, back to Chaplin. Like, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. absolutely disappears, and he becomes Charlie Chaplin, who I knew nothing about before Chaplin. So, and then Renee Zellweger, absolutely, like, I wasn't familiar with old Judy Garland. The Judy Garland I know is from The Wizard of Oz, like most humans. But I'll tell you, I've seen Renee Zellweger in enough other movies that she completely disappeared into her role as Judy Garland in her 40s.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize it was Renee Zellweger until the credits.
Right? Like,
I was sitting there watching it, and I'm thinking, I have seen her in something. And then I saw the credits, I went, I have seen you in a whole lot of somethings, and holy shit, that was the best one yet.
Yeah, she looks like somebody's great aunt. You're like, that's not Renee Zellweger, that's Aunt Tootie. And you're like, wait, holy crap, that's Renee Zellweger. Just absolutely
astounding.
Like, it is, why do we watch movies? Because we like to see magic performed, and all three of these, there's magic. So back to Stan and Ollie. All right, so as I said, the movie details basically the last couple of months before Oliver Hardy dies. The framing of this movie is basically, and it's not totally historically accurate. I was reading about that right before the podcast started, but who cares about historical accuracy? The story goes like this. Steve Coogan wants the Charlie Chaplin treatment, and they say you ain't no Charlie Chaplin. So he ends up splitting from Oliver Hardy for a while. Hardy stays with Al Roach. Stan Laurel goes and does his own thing, and then years later, trying to get a Robin Hood movie made, they do a tour of England and Ireland stage show, kind of get their name back out there, get some money rolling, and it starts off not great. They perform to some half-empty halls, and then eventually they start making some appearances around town. They start getting an audience, and this all leads to a confrontation between these two, which basically goes, Oliver Hardy kind of points his finger in Stan Laurel's face, and basically was like, "You're an empty guy. You're just a guy behind a typewriter. That's where you hide. You're not even a real person." And Stan Laurel's like, "But I loved us. I loved our comedy duo. I loved us as an act together." And Oliver Hardy says on the most heartbreaking thing in this entire movie, "You may have loved us, but you didn't love me." And there's a couple of other lines he says which are absolutely outstanding. Something about like, "Yeah, I go to ball games with friends and we put Crowder on hot dogs. So what?" It's a conversation about, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's really a conversation about like.
No, dude. This is one time I would actually encourage you to get a little bit sidetracked, because I think there's some interesting stuff to dig into here.
Well,
by all means, if you want to get sidetracked.
It's so funny. And I don't necessarily mean just to call anybody, including you, out, but I long for collaboration. I love my collaborations with you over the years, as contentious as they may have been at times. I still love them, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. Same with Robert. Robert and I have loved and wanted to punch each other in the head almost in the same podcast. I've always loved my collaborations with Jesse. It is those collaborations that make this whole enterprise better. I said I don't want an agreement the whole time. I want a conversation. I want a sharing of ideas. I want to be pushed. I want to be stretched, and I want to push and I want to stretch other people. And I love this format because it allows me to do that. But so I see a lot of myself in Stan Laurel, of like, no, it's the podcast that's the thing, and all of you kind of around me going, "Hey, we're all friends here. Could you calm the fuck down?" I look at Oliver Hardy's thing about like, yes, I have other friends. I have a whole other life. This isn't all I do. It's something I have actually heard one or two people say to me over the years. And there's no right or wrong in that thing. It was two different perspectives. It was two longtime friends and partners kind of banging heads. And I love that line about you may have loved us, but you never loved me. And it's about like, hey, it's not about just the act. It's about the person. It's about the person.
Well, okay. If I may veer off on an askew tangent from your tangent, if we're getting kind of meta talking about our chemistry, then I think that would kind of make me kind of like the Stan Laurel to your Stan Laurel. And I feel like, well, because you and I are both, especially in recent years, because folks, for those of you who have just been listening the last few years, I was the Jason Mewes to this man's Kevin Smith. I was a volatile, breaking down pain in the ass that he had to rein in order to kind of have a wild man by his straight man. We were like an FM drive time jock duo. Like someone that I would hear on The Rock here in Kansas City, or on 98.3 The Buzz back in Columbia, North Carolina.
We were the Opie and Anthony of movie reviews.
Exactly. But the thing is, then over the years, I started to kind of edge more and more toward kind of Mark's same page. And I started to find more and more of kind of a kindred mindset with him. Mm-hmm. And that's how we kind of got to this place where, not only do we have the podcast, but I'm always thinking about, I'd like to blog about this. I'd like to learn more about that. I'd like to learn how to do this down the road. Why don't I try that? there isn't really much of kind of that Oliver Hardy contented hedonism in me. And I know it sounds like I'm calling him out for that, and how dare I? I'm not. I mean, some people just, that's what it takes for them to be happy. They're good with the little things in life. My best friend in the world, who sadly is in the hospital recovering. By the way, love you, Jeremy. Please kick out at 2 at least one more time. No selling, buddy. He's, I guess he would be kind of the Hardy to my Laurel, so to speak. I always want to get out and really drink life to the lees, go into the woods and live deliberately. Jeremy would kind of be, if I'm going into the woods to live deliberately, Jeremy would be the one content to wait in the clearing with the tent, the beer, the Pepsi, the cigarettes, and, some Sinatra. But it's just different strokes from different folks. And I mean, even in their comedy, I think one thing you could clearly tell about Laurel and Hardy was they not only knew exactly who each other was, even if it brought them into conflict sometimes, but they still loved them for it, and they loved themselves for who they were.
So the fight so it ends with him saying, you may have loved us, but you didn't love me. And they continue to the tour a little bit more, but eventually Oliver Hardy collapses, and he's basically told, if you continue to perform, you're going to end up dead. And so initially he retires. He's like, I'm quitting the tour. There's a suggestion to maybe go on with a different comedian. And while it's considered at first, at some point Stan says, no, I'm not doing this. Not without Ollie. And if anyone's just like, could you do it a few more parallels to your own podcast, you egomaniac? Yeah, I will. I'll do one more. It's been suggested a couple of times, especially recently, that Robert is considering not wanting to do Damn You Hollywood anymore. And I keep saying, like, I can't make you do this. I'm in life and in relationships and in my house and in my podcast. If you don't want to be here, go find your happiness elsewhere. I'm not keeping you. But he's said to me on a couple of occasions, especially over the years, like, I'm not going to do this forever. I need to go do something else. And I said, okay, well, when you're done, we're done. Like, not as friends, but like, when you're done with Damn You Hollywood goes away forever. And he was like, get the fuck out of here. You'll find Alexis or, Dorian and his 87 people that he likes to bring with him, or he'll just have a rotating group of co-hosts. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Once you're gone, that's the end. I mean, I may continue to do something else, something entirely different, but Damn You Hollywood is Mark and Robert. It's been Mark and Robert from day one. It'll die Mark and Robert. And I don't want to go on and do that podcast, that format without him, period. And I won't. And that's where Stan gets to with Laurel and Hardy. He's like, I don't want to do this tour without him. I don't want to do this act without him. At least in the movie. And so eventually Ollie decides to finish the tour at the very least, which they do. And they show you one final performance, and you can see Ollie like just sweating. Like, this is clearly affecting his health. He's a big dude, and this is, the early 1900s or mid 1900s. Yeah. So, shortly after that performance, he dies. And shortly before that, there's a discussion about the movie that Laurel was trying to make. And he was like, yeah, there's no movie. We can't get financing for it. It's not happening. And it's funny because Ollie's like, yeah, I already knew that. And Stan's like, but for why? Why would you let me believe you knew? And they kind of do this who's on first thing, which is really funny. And he was just like, what would be my line here? The thing I love, I'm just going to get into my thoughts on Stan and Ollie. The thing I love about this movie, and again, I love collaboration. I love, when Sean and I put together ideas for, to do our movie reviews. When Dorian and I talk about, like, what can we do to make this better? When Robert's not in the mood and we can actually have like a good conversation about how we can make this better, that's what gives me energy. That's what gives me the fuel to keep going. I love that kind of collaborative talk. Everything Jesse and I do together when we're talking about how to make these podcasts, like especially lately playing with artificial intelligence, I love all that stuff. There's a lot of this movie is them coming up with script ideas, kind of talking in the, well, what would be my line if we were doing this on stage? Like, it's this kind of conversations that we all have with each other. I see in them, and I'm like, that's home for me. That that makes me feel seen and heard. I see us and them and us. Believe it or not, it's a very quiet movie. Like I said, like the biggest like action, most like contentious set piece is the argument that I keep referring to, and Ollie never raises his voice. He kind of he gets kind of he kind of harumphs and like, yeah, and we put, you know what? Yeah, I got friends, and we put sauerkraut on our hot dogs. So what? It's about as loud as he gets. And Steve Coogan's portrayal of Stan Laurel doesn't even get that loud, and he's like pissed off in like half the movie. The opening bit where he's like, "Why? What's Chaplin got that I ain't got?" A lot, sir, so much. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. But like he's that's like the most heated he gets in the entire movie is him like screaming and yelling about how they should get paid as much as Chaplin does, and then it's done, and it never gets that loud again. I love this movie. I think it's one of those where, and I'm gonna let you say your piece, and I'm gonna move on. It's one of those movies where it's like if you don't have an appreciation for classic Hollywood, then all that's left is performance, which is great performance. But I'm not entirely like I can see why this was an indie. This is one of those things that I think like film snobs would like, but I don't know how many normies could sit through this and then know why the film snob made him watch it. I'm actually curious to see what my numbers are on this particular podcast. Not that I care that much, but some stuff like
really intriguing,
like Beetlejuice or whatever, and there's like a zillion viewers, and then there's this. It's like, why? Why do I want to watch you talk about this? And it's like because it's so good.
Like the Beetlejuice podcast, I kind of look at as I call them my I understood that reference shows. Where we are sucking, we can maybe sometimes suck people in by just what movie or what franchise we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because again, back to the Stan Laurel comparisons, we come back to this one and we kind of feel like Stan Laurel because we want to talk about something that's a little more ambitious, that we feel has a little more meat on the bone that we want to delicately slice off. And sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't.
One really quick interjection, and then I'm going to shut up and let you finish, and then we'll get to Chaplin.
Yeah, sure.
Robert and I, when we reviewed like Babylon and some other, The Fall Guy even, there's a conversation that always takes place about who loves Hollywood anymore. Like, one of the things we said during the review of The Fall Guy is this probably didn't do as well as I thought it would because it assumes people still see magic in Hollywood. People still love Hollywood, not movies, Hollywood. And we think because of a lot of modern aggrandizing, agenda stuff, people have fallen out of love with Hollywood, which means they've fallen out of love with the history of it. So when you make a movie like Babylon, or you make a movie like Fall Guy, which definitely celebrates the wonderfulness of Hollywood, you're now preaching to an audience that you've lost, and that's a shame because Babylon, had its issues, but generally speaking, I loved it. And the Fall Guy was great fun, but it's asking you to remember that Hollywood is an awesome place that makes magic, and most people are like, no, actor said thing I didn't agree with, so Hollywood sucks now. And so so the point I'm bringing up is Stan and Ollie is a great movie. It's worth watching if you enjoy quiet drama, but it's going to lose people right from the get-go if you don't appreciate classic Hollywood.
Well, let's see. A few things to unpack here. You talked about how quiet the movie is. And what I like about that is that feels, in its own tonal way, kind of perfectly suited to a movie about, Laurel and Hardy. And that's because if you really go and watch a lot of the shorts, they're not necessarily loud.
No, one of the things I said I would shut up, but like John C. Reilly's portrayal of Ollie with that, like, because so much of modern comedy is loud and obnoxious. It's a clown. It's a clown falling on his ass hitting a horn every single scene. It's a guy slamming his dick in the door. And if you watch some of the comedy bits they do on stage, so let me just describe this for the people and then chime in. The setup is Ollie's laid up in the hospital with a busted leg. His leg's in a cast, and Stan has brought him snacks, and it's like, I'm laid up, I don't feel well, I'm hurt, so bring me comfort food. And he brings him like nuts or something, and it's like, basically like the equivalent of bringing him kale and a trail mix. And he's like, and he's like, I don't want this. And Laurel's like, okay, it's fine. And he's just kind of sitting there, and he's like starting to snack on the nuts himself. And it's like there's not a word of dialogue in this exchange. But he starts with the nuts, and then he pulls out an egg, and he's just kind of fucking with the egg. And then he pulls out salt, and he sprinkles salt on the egg, and it's like it just builds and builds and builds. And the point is, you're watching Laurel, but look at Hardy, and he's just sighing the whole time. And so much of the comedy and his reaction is in his eyes. And John C. Reilly pulled that off so well. It is the subtlest, funniest comedy I've ever seen.
Okay, well, to draw a distinction, if we're talking about that classic Hollywood era and what I'm thinking of when I talk about really loud slapstick, think Three Stooges.
Yeah.
Everything is fast, it's high impact, but it has a rhythm. It has a quick, bouncy, jaunty pace to it.
Yes.
If you're thinking about it in modern terms, which I find interesting since we're talking about a John C. Reilly movie, when I think of loud slapstick, I think of Will Ferrell.
As the Step Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. But hear me out. But the funny thing about that is, when Will really calms his tits and slows down a little bit and lets himself be an actor instead of just tall man make loud noise, fall down, go boom, and joke go on at least 60 seconds too long, Will is actually very damn funny. I know there are people who will disagree on that. Love you, Robert. I know you're probably chief among them. The man's a funny motherfucker when he tries. But when it comes to the comedy of Laurel and Hardy, and I think Abbott and Costello is another great example as well.
And thank you for that, because I've been sitting here trying to remember who the other ones were, and I couldn't remember Abbott and Costello. There's
a very neat kind of precision. There's a carefully measured tempo. It's still jazz, obviously, but it's a little more big band. It's a little more Louis Armstrong or Benny Goodman than really rollicking John Coltrane. And I think that the tone of the movie just suits that, because at times it really is like watching an epic length Laurel and Hardy picture, not a biopic of Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, the human beings, not the caricature. But beneath that, if you kind of go another layer or two deeper, what you really have is you have kind of a macrocosm of the whole notion of what do you do when the nature of your passion has passed you by. And I said at the top of the show, we see this in so many things that we cover. In comics, just the first example off the top of my head, And again, shout out to Jesse Starcher, as long as we're doing Radulich and Broadcasting Appreciation Night. I've heard it said, particularly by my buddy Comer and Mark, Frank Miller wrote Sin City, and then after that, he never stopped writing Sin City. he just wrote Sin City reskinned with different characters over and over and over again. And I think things his moment kind of passed him by, and nobody ever really told him. In music, you absolutely see it all the time. Yeah, you have some acts like AC/DC, where you listen to an AC/DC album, you are going to get nothing more or less than exactly what you expect, and sometimes that's the best thing going. But then you see other acts who just kind of refuse to evolve and kind of just keep going with the same shtick, and some are able to kind of still get it with the nostalgia bug, but for some, they just kind of seem to run out of gas. Like, it works until it doesn't. We see it all the time in MMA. Hell, go watch the Matt Hughes Hoist Gracie fight, where you're a jiu-jitsu guy going against somebody who's a grappler, a wrestler, can ground and pound, and Matt Hughes predicted for the fight. He's gonna lie there on the mat, and he's going to understand this sport has passed him by. Well, this is Laurel and Hardy. I almost don't know what to call him. Shit. Almost like they're trying to figure out, what do we do now that we're on the other side of the height of our powers. And you kind of have one man who really wants to branch out, who wants to do more, who wants to keep pushing and keep trying to be more creative. And another who feels like that got in the way of a good thing, because he was just enjoying the ride for as long as it lasted, and just running with it, trying not to rock the boat. Anything that meant he wouldn't have to walk away from the ATM that was still fucking spitting out money. And you talk about old Hollywood and the nature of it. And what I love about movies like this, and like Judy and like Chaplin, is it's easy to look at what we have nowadays and then look at everything great that came before that and wonder what was so special about the predecessors, because you've already seen the furthest extent of evolution to date of that. And so it doesn't seem that it's like, again, another comparison. It's like going and going and watching every episode of The Boys and reading The Boys before you ever know what Watchmen. So I feel like this is a glimpse into just how magical at the time old Hollywood was. Granted, as we'll get to, especially with Judy, there were a lot of skeletons in the closet that if people had known then what they know now, they might not have approached things a little bit differently. But I would definitely agree, because I can't think of, especially in the social media era, of really too many comedians who have kind of that level of being so internationally beloved that even in retirement, they're still able to go and still draw in at least, a kind of nice, tight group of absolutely rabid fans who remember them and would follow them to the ends of the earth. I mean, can you think of anyone? I can't.
No. All right. So we're about 45 minutes in. If you got nothing else, and I'm sure you do, but I mean, nothing that's like burning desire, let's move on to Chaplin.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Chaplin, again, came out in 1992. It was directed by Richard Attenborough. It stars Robert Downey Jr., Dan Aykroyd, Geraldine Chaplin, Kevin Dunn, who plays J. Edgar Hoover, which is awesome, Anthony Hopkins,
Kevin Kline, not Kevin Dunn.
No, there's a Kevin Dunn in here too. He plays J. Edgar Hoover. And then there's Kevin Kline.
No, Kevin Kline played J. Edgar Hoover.
No, he did not. Check.
What?
Dude, I'm reading it right off the cast list. Kevin Kline.
Okay,
is
you're
Douglas
probably right.
Fairbanks.
I'm probably wrong.
Kevin
That's
Kline
what I'm
is-
thinking of.
Yes, Kevin Kline plays Douglas Fairbanks.
Yep. How about you?
And yeah, Kevin Dunn was J. Edgar Hoover. Moving on. Diane Lane, Penelope Ann Miller, Paul Rees, John Thaw, Marissa Tomei in this, Nancy Travis, and James Woods. So this is the life and times of Charlie Chaplin. In short, he's got a crazy mom, and the dad is. When he's young, he's trying to get him into comedy. He eventually gets work in America. He comes here to do films in the golden age of Hollywood during the silent film era. He gets here. He's in a movie. They have Marissa Tomei's character who is directing, and she's terrible. And he was like, look, how much worse could this possibly be? Let me do this myself. He's created this character called the Tramp, which is, if you think it's like Charlie Chaplin, you think him and the Tramp are like the same guy. And that's just who this guy was. This, this silly guy with a cane who used to poke people in the butt with it, that sort of thing. Nope, that was a character called the Tramp. Anyway, he goes on to have this really successful career playing the Tramp in a zillion movies. He eventually has his own studio. He makes these wildly popular pictures. He manages to piss off J. Edgar Hoover and get accused of being a communist. He makes a movie that seems to criticize America vis-a-vis the immigrant. This is all done under the framing device of he's telling his life story to his biographer, who is a fictional character, and is played by Sir Anthony Hopkins. So there's a lot of like explaining certain, cut to an explanation of why things were happening or what the deal was or why this particular woman he was with was just a bitch. It's a great line. I just thought she was a total bitch. You get to see a lot of the inspiration for his films. You get to see, during one of his movies, his entire marriage falls apart because all he cares about is making this movie. At one point, one of the movies that he's making is declared an asset in a divorce, and so they in like what feels like a very stylized choice, they do an in-movie version of like a Charlie Chaplin or like a silent film era comedy where everything is sped up and there's a chase, and it's literally like they're running away with reels of footage because they don't want to have to submit. They don't want to give it to the ex-wife. This you go through 87 of his fucking people that he married, and it ends with him getting, I think, like a Lifetime Academy Award. And he goes to Switzerland to escape the Red Scare, from what I remember, and he ends up being ejected from the United States. And so I think he comes back long enough to receive the award, and then shortly thereafter he died. It is said in the movie he is the most important person to ever come out of Hollywood. He is the most famous person in the world. His movies are an inspiration were inspirations for years to come. It's an enduring legacy of a man and of a character and of a career. Let me say this of the movie, and I'll let you cut in to talk. You sent me a message before the podcast started tonight of, hey, we don't need to necessarily lean too heavy on the craft here. There's not a tremendous amount of style in any of these movies, but I think the themes that they're getting at, the greater points that they're talking about, are more important than the craft. And I didn't disagree with you, but this is the most stylized of the three.
Oh, far and away.
Stan and Ollie and Judy are pretty straightforward, and they are carried in large part by individual performances of the leads. Chaplin's the most well-rounded in terms of everything is firing on all cylinders of the three movies. It's just weird that it got mixed reviews, by the way. Robert Downey Jr., I think, won an Oscar for it, but the movie in and of itself seemed to have rubbed people the wrong way. I think it's got some interesting styles. Like I said, like that bit in Utah where they're doing the sped up chase, it's like a Charlie Chaplin film, or Marx Brothers, or Abbott and Costello, or Laurel and Hardy. It's funny as shit, and it kind of took me by surprise because I'd forgotten all about it. And then like they're doing this, I'm like, they're doing an in movie thing. Beyond that, when we talked about The Great Gatsby, we talked about costumes, the style of the Roaring 20s. And I'm definitely paying attention to stuff like that now. The style of an age, and this was not only just individually transformative in that Robert Downey Jr. ceases to exist, and what you see is what you think is Charlie Chaplin, but also I was really transported to the early 20th century with the way people talked. Even Kevin Kline's character, like Douglas Fairbanks, he had a very distinct way that he spoke. It's not quite some of the stuff Kubrick was doing. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But not see this Charlie Chaplin, none of that. But there was definitely they definitely zhuzhed it up with a lot of style and performance, a lot of style and line delivery, style and costume, style and setting. Um, for a movie that is supposed to be a biopic of this man's life and times, it feels like a movie's movie. Like, I never necessarily felt like I was getting a window into an old world so much as I knew I was watching a fictionalized telling of this man's life. Everything feels alive and colorful and very Oz-like. Speaking of Judy, I love this movie. I watched it last weekend, and I don't really have a bad thing to say about it. I don't have a bad thing to say about Chaplin. I mean, were there not great things he did in the movie? Sure. Neglecting your family to make a movie is never good. But I would say for the most part, it kind of reminds you of what it takes to be successful in the land of opportunity. You have to have a degree of bravery, creativity, stubbornness, and a willingness to fail and keep at it again.
Well, and on another level, I would go so far as to point out, and this is going to seem like a big statement, but really give it some thought, and I want to hear your reaction to it. Stupid people cannot consistently make objectively great comedy.
It's fair.
I don't think you can truly excel at making people laugh in any medium without being kind of exceptionally aware, probably more than a little bit neurodivergent, and extremely introspective and sensitive. I mean, even if you think of some of the more vulgar, foul-mouthed, really legendary comedians, and you go back and you really dissect their material, there is 100% of thought and intent, and planning and practice and vision in what they're doing. That's how you get people who can kind of routinely continue to evolve and be entertaining and be beloved for making people laugh, because they're always in tune with both themselves and with the moment.
I got to jump in here. It's going to be your favorite part of the podcast. It's going to be the wrestling reference of the night.
Yes.
Okay. There's Dusty Rhodes, and then there's the fuck's his name? The Red Rooster.
Terry Taylor.
Thank you. There's Dusty Rhodes.
Go on.
There's Dusty Rhodes, and there's Terry Taylor. You give anything to Dusty Rhodes, and I'm going somewhere with this. I'm going to lead this right back into the movie. You give anything to Dusty Rhodes will take it and make it wonderful and engaging and make you money with it. Dusty Rhodes was a genius. Say what you will about his presentation, his looks, the way he spoke. He didn't always hit it out of the park. No one ever does. Your best baseball players on earth didn't hit a home run every time at bat. And I think to expect that and then take away from people's legacy is unfair. But again, Dusty Rhodes always took chicken shit for the most part and gave you chicken salad. Genius. Terry Taylor,
good hand.
Given the same level of bad ideas, was not able to turn around and make it anything decent. Not a genius. Perfectly serviceable mechanic. Not a genius. Dusty Rhodes is a genius. Terry Taylor was a wrestler. My favorite scene in the movie, relative to what I'm talking about, is Charlie Chaplin's putting on this suit that does not fit. and he finds a hat to kind of complete the ensemble. Then he sees a cane, and then there's a shot of him kind of walking away from the camera, and he doesn't quite know how to work with the pants, and so he does that waddle, and he figures it out as he's walking. He's like, if I do this, and then if I do this, and he took an ill-fitting suit and a random cane he found and a hat, and it was like, I can make chicken salad out of this. This is all garbage. This is all bullshit. But I can do something with this. That's genius.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a subtle thing. It was such a little detail. But from where he walks in the close to the camera to where he ends up by the time they cut away from it, his whole walk changes. And he finds the Charlie Chaplin character. And it's just in that walk. Brilliant. Genius.
Yeah. I mean, Chaplin, thematically, when I think about the movie and when I think about the man, I think of a man who was far ahead of his time.
Yeah.
In terms of the kind of bold, independent control that he wanted to have over his art. And he was a man who held a deep conviction that it was indeed absolute art.
Yeah.
He was willing to push and sacrifice and play hardball for that. And to use this bully pulpit that he'd kind of pratfallen into and use it to remind the world, I'm not your performing monkey. I'm a human being with thoughts who sees what's going on around me. And I'm not going to be entirely silenced by it, nor am I going to be driven back.
The best line of this movie is when he's talking to Douglas Fairbanks as they're playing tennis or badminton, whichever one it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to him, they're not going to like a foreigner criticizing the country. And he says, it is precisely because I am a foreigner and I love this country that I can criticize it.
Exactly.
110% right.
Exactly. But the other thing that I think of is how, not unlike Stan and Laurel, how ambitious he really was at heart in where he wanted to take his career, where he wanted to take comedy, and everything that he wanted to learn how to do more of and to bring to the screen. He was met with, the equivalent back then of, say the line, Bart! all anybody wanted was, ha, little tramp, fall down.
Mm-hmm.
And he believed that he had more to offer. And we talk about problems that we see nowadays. Hell, look at Robert Downey Jr. Look at the fact that the man is undeniably a generational talent as an actor who has made so many fantastic movies, so many transformative performances over the years. But the first thing anybody wants to talk about is Tony fucking Stark. And I mentioned in the chat with you, and unfortunately he was on Here Tonight, Dorian, how this is something that's becoming emblematic of a lot of top-notch performers that we're seeing throughout the MCU, particularly, I think, among Gen Z, probably more than any other generation. They're not associating these people as great actors who've also been in a lot of other fantastic things. Then look at Chris Evans, all they're ever going to see is Captain America. Chris Hemsworth is a top-notch actor. All anyone's going to look at him and ever see is Thor. Elizabeth Olsen, Clark Gregg, right on down the line. All these outstanding performers, and all they're ever going to be known as the characters. We make the cinema joke all the time, but it's one of the times when I think it was either Scorsese or Coppola that was criticizing that exactly. These performers aren't being known as actors anymore. They're just being known for the characters that they play. That's all they're being recognized at. And I mean, granted, our generation has kind of had that too. I think of Twilight. And my wife and I were just talking the other day about how it's astounding that at the time we thought that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were just the most wooden dog shit actors to top a squat on a screen in years. And now we found out ever since then, oh, no, they're actually fantastically gifted performers. They were just given complete dreck to work with. So it's that frustrating danger of being pigeonholed. Some people come out of it like Robin Williams and are able to really get out there and display what they've got. But a lot of people, once they kind of get pigeonholed early on because it's what's getting them work, they don't quite find those roles or that work that is able to really show people what they can do.
A really quick aside. Do you remember one of the reasons why I wanted to watch Insatiable with you was because the girl who was the lead in Insatiable had come out of the Disney XD or
God, you're
the
right.
Disney Channel.
Insatiable. I haven't thought about that one in a while.
I've been listening to a lot of our old stuff, not just you or my own, so just old stuff in general. Long story. Anyway, my point is, like, I was very interested in that actress whose name now escapes me, but she was on a show called Jessie, and that's where I knew her from because my kids love that show. And she was very much branded Disney actress, which is the kiss of death. And you really have to then you really have to make an effort to un-Disneyfy yourself. You don't quite have to go the Elizabeth Berkley route, showgirls and blow up on the launch pad. But she did Insatiable, and she was great. We loved that show, and I don't think we wanted to go past 2 seasons. I think by the end of the second season, we were like, we're done here.
Yeah.
But we liked the range she showed, and she definitely un-Disneyfied herself. Another one, Dove Cameron, I believe it was. Dove Cameron does the the Disney, the kids of the Disney villains movies. Descendants, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's really gone out of her way to try to wipe the stink of the Descendants off of her and be like, look, I'm a
more recently, I think of Cole Sprouse.
I don't know who that is.
Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Okay, I am aware that's the show.
Okay, let's see. Another one. I don't know if you've heard of this one or not. Lisa Foyles is another one I think of.
Okay. Wasn't Zac Efron a Disney kid?
Oh yeah, High School Musical. Yeah.
Look at what Zac Efron's done since then.
And I forget her name, and I forget who I want to say. I think it was Mark Morrison from the other W2M shows that I was talking to. He brought and I can't remember her name now, but he brought to my attention a former Disney kid who became a very successful porn star.
Okay.
I'm man enough to admit I looked her up. Good work.
No, it's fine. I'm not against you. I just this conversation, the direction that it just turned, I find that amusing.
Well, yeah, but again, but what it's talking about is relevant. You can go back even further and kind of look at the respective wild career trajectories of Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Hilary Duff, Lindsay Lohan, Miley fucking Cyrus, all of the above. They all, with varying degrees of success, had to at some point really roll some dice to just kind of wipe that residue of the past away and say, look, this is everything you haven't wanted to see, but hopefully all that past fame has now kind of given me a little bit of clout that I can at least get an at bat to show you something else.
Right. Anything else about Chaplin before we move on?
I mean, I think that's about it. I think anybody who sees it should keep in mind that whole shut up and blank mentality towards any famous person who dares to have an opinion. It ain't gone. Just changed clothes.
All right. Our final film of the evening that we're going to talk about is Judy, once again. It's a 2019 biographical drama film based on the life of American entertainer Judy Garland, most famous for The Wizard of Oz. It was directed by Rupert Gould. It was based on the musical. It follows Garland's career during the last year of her life when she relocated her stage career to England, coupled with flashbacks of her childhood, most prominently the shooting of her part as Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz from 1939. Her most famous film role. After some initial success in a run of sellout concerts at Talk of the Town in London, her efforts eventually stopped making progress and even start to worsen as her health deteriorates. So when we meet her, it kind of bounces back between the abuse she took, and it was abuse, while making Wizard of Oz and being a contract actress with MGM, with where she is now, where she's performing with her kids. And there's a great conversation with the ex-husband who's like, she ends up back at his house because they don't have money to pay for their hotel. And he's like, it's the middle of the night and it's a school night. What are you doing? And there's Renee Zellweger as Judy Garland, like, you don't understand. I'm trying to perform, and he's like, oh my god, you crazy person. Ugh, I don't want to spend the next hour telling you I have been that guy, trying to make sense out of a lunatic, justifying piss poor behavior. In any case, he's like, you really can't though. These are children. They need structure. They need to go to school. They need to not be out in the middle of the fucking night, you lunatic. So she goes to a party. She meets a guy. This gets her a gig at Talk of the Town in England. So she goes there and she's living at home. That's where the rest of the movie pretty much takes place. And you really get, the movie is essentially about Judy Garland's mental illness that she has developed over the years. And it's like, but why? Why was Judy Garland a mental case in her 40s? Oh, because of the shit that happened to her when she was a child.
Well, and let's set the record straight on something. The depictions of the vast majority of that abuse, it kind of lets the audience off light in terms of giving them a full taste of just how bad notoriously how bad it's really well known.
There's some implied sexual abuse, but they don't show you any. The mostly it's just the feeding her drugs. So feeding her drugs, starving her, so
not letting her sleep.
Not letting her, feeding her drugs to keep her up, feeding her more drugs so that she will sleep, starving her, and basically anytime she was like, "But I'm a real girl who needs food and sleep," they're like, "Yeah, but don't you want to be pretty and famous?" Like, that's not manipulative at the fuck all.
Well, let's just get the thematic acknowledgement out of the way right here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things to take away from this movie is that Hollywood is this remorseless, insatiable titan that is forever eating its own children almost as soon as it's born, and it especially relishes in equals. The younger they are, the sweeter to the titan.
I feel like we've covered some of this anytime that we've talked about, like, Drew Barrymore, who famously, was another child actress that was abused.
That's because it never fucking changes.
Yeah.
I mean, look at fucking Nickelodeon. Look at the Disney Channel. Look at everything that's coming to light now, and how there's this kind of ill foreboding feeling of
the dark side of it's the dark side of what we were talking about with Stan and Laurel, at the very top of the podcast, where I said, but the podcast is the thing. The show is the thing. The partnership is the thing. And the reminder of we're still fucking human beings. That's what I was trying to get at before. It's, when we get to Judy Garland here, there's no acknowledgement that this is a human. You are. It's funny. I've brought it up in the past. Alfred Hitchcock basically saying, like, actors are like moving scenery. Like, this concept, like, we tend to think that this is like a new thing, but I think from like the birth of Hollywood, and probably before there was ever a Hollywood, before there was silent film, before there was film at all, there was the mentality of the show is the thing and the people don't matter.
Well, and the fact is, when we're looking at these three movies, you have to keep in mind that we touched earlier on the magic of old Hollywood. And a lot of that magic is that these truly were incredibly, generationally talented all around performers. It wasn't just one thing they did well. You watch them and you realize they can sing, they can dance. Oliver Hardy was phenomenally spry for a big guy. They were
Rhodes.
they were thoughtful. They really could do everything. It wasn't quite like nowadays when, and again, that's not to say there weren't people who just kind of accidentally just kind of fell ass backwards into fame. I mean, John Wayne famously was moving furniture on set as a stagehand, and the director liked the way he carried himself. It might have been Doug Ford, actually.
I think Ford was a carpenter.
No, wasn't Doug Ford. He's a Canadian politician. Sorry, Andrew Graham. There was something Ford. Something was right. Anyway, I'll remember later. Anyway,
Harrison Ford was a carpenter at the time.
It wasn't Harrison Ford. I think Harrison Ford might have been a zygote back then.
No, I know, but that's another example.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Wayne was moving furniture on a set. Director liked the way he carried himself. Was trying to make a case to, I think, the leading man in the movie who was having trouble coaching along, and that kind of led to John Wayne making a killing, making the same movie 500 fucking times for most of his career. Right. Harrison Ford was a carpenter, but he had a natural presence. He had a natural charisma. And, you can teach somebody to act. You can't teach those things. You can't necessarily teach carrying yourself a certain magnetic way. And that was what these all had, is in addition to that talent, they also had that presence that I don't think we fully recognize today. Not very many of our greatest generational actors and actors, aside from a few, have.
So the movie, so she gets to England, and one of the reasons why I really drilled in on the mental illness stuff is, here's an opportunity. I'm gonna sit in the closet and be impossible. Look, people are here. People love you. People have paid to come see you. What am I? Some kind of what am I, a clown for your amusement? Like, oh my God, Judy. And this, she kind of goes up and down to where she's tolerable, she's intolerable, she's amazing, she's impossible, and it's a lot of bipolar, PTSD, personality disorder. Just throw a dart, you'll hit a mental illness, and she's got it. Not to mention the substance abuse. So this goes on, and then she doesn't. Her voice is affected by the tracheotomy that she's had, which I do love this, because I know people like this now who you're actively killing yourself. You've now smoked to the point where your health is deteriorating rapidly, and yet you keep smoking. In fact, I know somebody who carries around an oxygen tank and still smokes. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, she's had a tracheotomy. Her voice ain't what it used to be, and she continues to smoke. That sort of thing. She doesn't want to sing anymore. She's just kind of over it. But singing is the only thing that's paying the bills right now. And then she thinks she's going to get an opportunity to have an easier gig. And then she fucks up big enough to where now everyone's afraid of her. She's too flaky. She's too much of a risk. The deal falls through. She then has a giant temper tantrum, which gets her fired from Talk of the Town. And then she has an explosion with the current husband, who she marries during the course of the film. And at the end of all things, she's like, I'd like to sing one last song. And so she does. She tries to make the best of a bad situation. She's off the show, but she shows up the one last night. She sings two songs. And what is the line? Promise you'll remember me, which is fucking sad. You won't forget me, will you? And then promise you won't. And the film end card says Judy died 6 months later in the summer of '69 at the ripe old age of 47, which I was last year, to give you some context. I said it before, the film has really no style to it. It's just, here's what happened at the end of this woman's poor life.
Yeah.
The most stylistic thing it does is bounce back between The Wizard of Oz and what she was doing at that age of her life and what she's doing now, so that you have context. The film's perspective is this girl suffered an unending torrent of abuse. all in the name of fame and fortune, and in the end, it killed her. That's the movie. Hope you like it, which I do. I think it's sad, it's tragic, but I think Renee Zellweger, like I said, has this really transformative performance, which she won an Oscar for it, as I recall. But I was reading some of the critical reception of it. People didn't love. Not everyone loves her performance in this, and I think the big knock against her is you're at a 10. It's distracting. We need you to be at a 6. And I don't know. I wasn't there, but I feel like that's how Judy Garland actually was. And I think Renee Zellweger really went for it to give you the authentic, coming apart at the seams Judy Garland, which is the point of the fucking movie. I really liked it. There isn't much more to it than Renee Zellweger as Judy. Ain't nobody else in this movie who's worth a fucking damn. Except for maybe Mare during the Wizard of Oz scenes, who is the devil. He is just creepy and awful and horrible. And second to him is the woman managing the actresses, who's just like, here's pills, go to sleep. Here's pills, wake up. God, don't you dare eat that cheeseburger, you bitch.
Yeah, Louis B. Mayer was pretty much the closed beta for Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, my line that I was going to say was, this woman could have doubled as one of the teachers at fucking Hogwarts. Yes, thank you. The joke would have been funnier if I'd nailed the school. Anyway, my point is, you like old Hollywood, you like Judy Garland, you like mental illness and substance abuse stories. Watch Judy, Sean.
I mean, it was gripping. I certainly wasn't expecting a movie that focused so much on her later life, especially the very kind of last stanza of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I feel about the fact that it really let the abuse kind of off lately. It felt like it didn't really drive home exactly how that broke her. So it's almost like you just have to kind of take the movie's word for it.
David Simon once said somewhere out there, Robert's like, please stop referencing The Wire. The answer is no. I am who I am. Leave me alone. But David Simon once said, The Wire is too sad. That's the perception people have of it. It's too sad. And he was like, it could have been so much worse. Like we could have put so much more into The Wire, but then it's so sad it's unwatchable.
And I mean,
there are movies that deal with sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I don't know if you go too far into that stuff, you're going to lose what they're trying to do on the other side of it, I guess would be my only defense of it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gets away from the idea of kind of boiling a woman down to just the abuse that she suffered and that's it.
Right.
And I like that it ends on kind of a triumphant note at the end. So I guess there's that too. I guess it just wasn't necessarily entirely what I was expecting, because like I said, I kind of expected a movie that went back further and was maybe going to show how those cracks really started to form. I ended up loving what was there. Don't get me wrong. And I love it because I think that's something that we have to kind of remember about that old Hollywood nostalgia, and kind of the dangerous thing about it, and about all nostalgia, is the fact that by all means, like what you like, cherish what you cherish. But, you sometimes also have to understand that, your nostalgia boner is not necessarily going to be grounds for taking away from a deeper conversation that may surround that thing. And those things still need to be talked about. So you have to kind of have the maturity to understand that one doesn't negate one doesn't negate the other, and that's a two-way street. That can't always be a shield when talking about bigger human issues that surrounds us. Well, hell, we talk about his wrestling fan. It's one of those things that always makes me a little bit comfortable. People talk about the Attitude Era and go really overboard with that nostalgia. Yeah, great, fantastic professional wrestling. Whole lot of people that I wish could still be around to talk about it because they absolutely 100% fucking should be. And
when
you
you look at like the Hogan era and think about the amount of guys who died in their 40s between the cocaine and the steroids.
Oh my God, yes.
And then to me, it always gets summed up by Jake Roberts at the Hall of Fame, where he takes a beat. He's having a great speech. It's one of the, it's in the storied history of Jake's post career, where he's either a crackhead or he's doing awesome when no one quite knows for sure. He's doing this great speech. Everyone loves Jake. He could not be more charismatic and inviting, and just, oh my God, a window to a long lost bygone era. And he takes a beat with all of that, and he goes, all my friends are dead. And it's like, I've never heard a sadder line delivered during an acceptance speech. But
and Bret Hart has made a lot of the same observation, particularly having an entire special feature, a brief little clip montage in his going way back, his WWE home video that he co-produced. It was just a montage of everybody, of like most of his kind of most noteworthy friends and colleagues over the years, who at the time were no longer with us. And since then, sadly, that list has grown. And I remember watching that, and it just jarring to think that all these people who, when I did the math, I realized absolutely should not be dead. We're no longer around to share in all these great memories.
Sid Udy, Psycho Sid Justice, whatever you want to call him.
He passed recently.
Yeah, he just died. He was born in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he died at the age of 63. Just still better than 47, but still not when you're supposed to die in the year of our Lord 2024.
Yeah, but I mean, but the really sad thing is the more we look at this, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about how many stories like Judy we're probably going to get in the coming decade or so, because you have, particularly I think from the early 2000s and late 90s, a lot of pop culture figures and entertainment icons of the time who we really relegated to joke butts back then. And we're only now starting to realize the kinds of horrors they were going through. And I think that's something about Judy that really drove me home, was frequently what you'll see in a lot of stories when someone famous is really lamenting that the price they paid or some of the people they had to work for. You'll always have some projecting jackass who will pop into the comments or the chat or whatever and say, but you sure did cash those checks though. Well, yeah, dumb fuck. That's precisely the problem. Is you have young, passionate, creative, dedicated performers who genuinely loved what they were doing, but they were also then put to the heartbreaking choice of, endure this sacrifice of your dignity and your innocence and your personal safety and sometimes your longevity, but here's a bunch of money and here's getting to do exactly what you love doing the most.
Yeah, the idea that people should be punished for being entertainers is pretty ridiculous.
Well, I mean, just in the past few years, we've seen a lot of exposés and memoirs from the likes of, just off the top of my head, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, Pamela Anderson, If you want to go back generationally, my God, go listen to Elvira's memoir
Mm.
and listen to what she endured. Spoiler: you're never going to look at Andy Williams quite the same way again. But still to come, there are so many stories of these child stars that we haven't heard in full yet.
Oh my God,
And
Carrie Fisher's story.
oh my God. It's like
if Judy Garland's
like,
too far back, check out Carrie Fisher's story. It's practically the same.
yeah, like you want a Rushmore of exploited actors and actresses. Like it's like Carrie Fisher, Corey Feldman, Drew Barrymore, and yeah, I'd go ahead and probably throw Britney Spears on there. And the really sad thing is that keeps happening. And the really sad part is the people in charge are basically the same shitty monstrous fuckwits as those people in the comments who are saying, yeah, but you cashed the checks, didn't you? Except these are powerful fucking people. These are your Harvey Weinsteins of the world, your Vince McMahons, your Dr. Luke, who just see someone with a dream and they just see someone that they can use up and spit out because there's always going to be another one.
There's always more. All right. Anything else about Judy before we go? I mean, like I said, I think it's a worthy watch. I think Renee Zellweger makes it a worthy watch. But whether you're interested in the subject matter or not, I think it's a well-made enough movie with a stellar performance at its sort of central leg. But it's not much going on besides that. Your thought?
Judy is more of the traditional biopic where I would throw in along the lines of, if you liked Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody, Ray, Ring of Fire, your standard biopic like that. Judy is going to be right up your alley. If you're looking for something that's a little more artful and stylized, and this could even serve as my kind of summation of all the movies. Stan and Ollie, if you told me that had been made by Wes Anderson, I would have believed it. It's that understated. It's that beautiful. It's that well paced. It's that it feels that much like a concept of a full length Laurel and Hardy meta movie. Chaplin, as you pointed out, it's very stylized, necessarily so. Chaplin is probably going to be right up your alley if you liked something like Ed Wood or I'm Not There, the Bob Dylan biopic, where Dylan was played by something like a dozen different fucking performers.
Of the three, it's the most mainstream. It has the most mainstream sensibilities. It has the biggest, other than its other than the length of the movie. I think it clocks in at over 2 hours. 2 hours and 25 minutes.
But ultimately, what you have three biopics that absolutely do justice to figures in entertainment, without whom I don't think we have a lot of entertainment as we know it today.
Well said. Folks, that is our triple feature on Stan and Ollie, Chaplin, and Judy. On Monday, we looked at Ash vs. Evil Dead. That was myself and not host Alexis Haina and Dorian Price and Robert Winfrey, who was notoriously of little energy that night for some strange reason. Next week, Damn You Hollywood is back after a hiatus of about a week or so. We are looking at Transformers 1. That's got we're gonna, speaking of which, Cole Marintet.
My buddy.
Yeah, your buddy. I always bring him on to do the Transformers stuff. It's funny. I'll probably say this again on the podcast, but I don't ask people. Like, I have like regular people who I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? But I typically do not ask people to come on my podcast. I'm doing a show. If people want to come on, you're welcome. The door is now open. But I don't necessarily go through my Rolodex of people on Facebook Messenger and go, hey, how would you like to do a podcast? The only exception to that is Cole, and only when I do Transformers.
Oh, he knows, and I can tell you from talking to him, he is absolutely chuffed for it. He is so excited.
Yeah. I remembered, like, oh, you're my Transformers guy. I have to have you on. So we're reviewing Transformers 1 Monday, and then Thursday, the Metal Hammer of Doom Jukebox is back. We are doing the new Nightwish album, which comes out tomorrow if you're listening to this live on the 19th of September. It is Nightwish, Yesterwind, spelled with a Y for some strange reason. The week after that, we've got The Wild Robot, and then we close out the month on October 3rd with the X Trilogy, which currently stands at an all-star cast of friends and lovers: Sean Comer, myself, Pat Mullen, and Alexis Haina. It's going to be a grand time. I cannot wait. No one will be friends when it's all over. It'll be fantastic. But we're going to have fun.
Probably not, and I am probably going to be responsible for that because I know at least 2 people that do not like me. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, we'll see who shows up that night. All right, so that's all I got here. I am at Mark Radulich on TikTok, where you'll find clips of this show, clips of previous other shows. My most recent TikTok is I pulled a clip from season 3 of The Wire, where Jesse and I read the well, who we got scene. And Jesse's like, I should have came on tonight as Eggy Mule, which is the greatest name ever. So it's a lot of fun. I got to pull more stuff out of that clip. But yeah, you can see my karaoke there, clips of my kids, clips of my show, all that. So at Mark Radulich on TikTok. Sean, go ahead and do your plugs and we'll get out of here.
All right. You can actually lately catch me 2 places on Twitch. I'm back to streaming at twitch.tv/ComerCodex. Tune in if you like a variety of story-based games and also a whole lot of ranked Overwatch. Also, on Tuesdays, speaking of Cole, you can find me over at his stream, twitch.tv/FilmTwit, where I join him and our buddy Josh for what we call Team Up Tuesday, which is where we grow up. Yeah, never. Group up and play some PvE games. Usually it's going to be either Monster Hunter, or lately it has been a whole lot of Space Marine 2. So yeah, catch us there for a few hours every Tuesday evening, long about 6 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Karmic Revenge for all the times you got confused while I was living in Phoenix. 5 p.m. Central Time. Again, that's twitch.tv/thefilmtwit.
So Sean will be on, as I said, the X Trilogy in a few weeks. And then apparently you're not on anything else until January, which I will talk to you about when the show is over. But so check that out. And that show, I believe, let me pull you up again. Assuming he doesn't come on what I have going on in October. Yeah, after the X Trilogy, which is October 3rd, the next time you'll see Sean theoretically is January 9th for our David Fincher focus of The Killer, Seven, and Zodiac. So we'll see what happens. All right. So for Sean Comer, you're not. I'm the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and please remember me.